the website for everybody who isn't able to be here today. Thank you all for being here. My name is Kristen Bailey, and I'm serving as the state PTA treasurer this year. I have served as a local unit president and treasurer and kind of all the positions there, as well as at the district level. And I'm excited to be serving on the state board this year. So we will go ahead and get started. We are recording this, like I said. I think what we're going to do for questions, if it suits all of y'all, is I'll just kind of take a break at kind of various sections of the presentation and just ask if there are any questions. You can always put them in the chat. I may just not see them in the chat until the end. So, but feel free, if you have a pressing question, we're going to keep it casual. Feel free to unmute and just be like, I don't understand anything you just said. So that's fun as well. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. There we go. All right. Can you guys see that? We'll minimize this to get it out of the way.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So this is our treasurer's training for South Carolina PTA. If this is not the one you were trying to attend, then feel free to stay and listen, or feel free to log off. It's not going to hurt my feelings. But this is treasurer's training. Again, I'm Kristen Bailey. We're just going to kind of go over the general duties of the treasurer right now. So part of what your responsibility is, if you are an incoming treasurer, is to obviously maintain a full account of the PTA funds. Your job is to keep the whole unit on budget, keep your records up to date, and being organized is key. I will say something about that. I do not have a background in finance. You do not need to be a CPA to do this job. You do not even need to be good at math. You simply need to be organized. That is honestly the most critical aspect of being a good treasurer, is just being able to keep detailed records, keep everything straight, because the math that's involved is really basic addition and subtraction that everybody is capable of doing. So the treasurer's job is to make all the payments, pay expenses, put the deposits in the bank, and make sure that they're all accounted for in alignment with your budget and your bylaws. The treasurer should be an active participant in managing and planning for the unit's activities and spending. They need to be, at the table when all of those discussions are happening. The treasurer attends meetings. They are part of the executive committee, the executive board. They vote and present the required financial reports. The treasurer is also responsible for making sure that the IRS 990 is submitted each year, even if your unit, say during COVID, we had a lot of units that were not active. That 990 has to be submitted no matter what your unit is doing in order to stay in good standing with the IRS. The treasurer is responsible for coordinating the financial review at the end of the year and delivering to the incoming treasurer after you all of the records at the end of your term. And for anyone who's ever rolled into a PTA position with no binder, no turnover, you know that that's a critical element of your responsibilities. So let's talk about tasks that typically need to happen in May and June. Now, this is July. If these haven't happened, don't anybody panic, but I just want you to be prepared for how these usually happen. So in May and June, your budget for the next year should be approved by the general membership. This is important because it allows your unit to spend and receive money over the summer. So the PTA fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30th. So that's why you want to make sure in the end of your school year that you have at least a draft budget approved by your membership. So if somebody wants to donate a large amount of money to your PTA over the summer, or you need to go ahead and buy back to school items or have a back to school teacher breakfast, that you have an approved budget, because without that, you cannot spend or receive any money. So that's a key thing. If that has not been done already by the treasurer that you are coming in for, that is something that you'll want to take care of at the very beginning of the year. As soon as you've got members coming in August, you'll want to make sure that you get an approved budget. The budget is a dynamic document. It is not set in stone. You don't approve it for the year and then you're like, oh no, we can't make any changes. It can be revised, reapproved, adjusted as many times as you need to during the year. So don't feel like whatever you approve in May is you're locked into for the following year, because you never know. The principal may come up with something they need over the summer. You may get an opportunity for a new fundraiser. You can always incorporate that and revise your budget. July and August tasks. So all of the authorized signers on the bank accounts need to be updated now, because we are into July. So the folks who rolled off need to be removed as authorized signers on your bank account, and the folks who are coming on need to be added. Banks do that different ways. Some of them require you to come in, some of them will allow for e-sign, but just contact your financial institution and find out how to make that happen, because you need to go ahead and get those authorized signers on. Make sure that your insurance is current. Take a look at your insurance coverage and make sure that you know when the expiration date for your policy is, so that you can get that renewed so you don't ever have a lapse in coverage. The financial review needs to be completed or scheduled for completion now. Technically, this is the responsibility of the outgoing treasurer. Sometimes it doesn't work like that. Sometimes your treasurer gets to the end of the year and checks out, but the financial review, because we have our June bank statements, the financial review needs to be done now. Don't wait until November when it's crazy in the fall and there are so many other things going on. Go ahead and get either 3 volunteers or 1 CPA and get that done and uploaded to GiveBacks this summer, just so you don't have to worry about it. Same thing with your 990 filing. Go ahead after you complete the financial review and file your 990, or get with your CPA to get that done. Again, filing with the Secretary of State is, you can complete that now. Don't wait until the fall, although the due dates are in October and November. Go ahead and do it now. There's no harm, and it's one less thing you have to worry about. And we'll talk in detail about all of those different tasks. I'll just pause here for 1 second before we get into your recurring duties. Anybody have any questions about the general overview? Nope. Okay, we will move on. So recurring duties. What does the treasurer do daily, in and out, every month? They're responsible for income, expenditures, monthly reconciliations, and providing a treasurer's report, a budget update to the board every month. So to receive money, if you're receiving money in person, this is getting less and less frequent as we move to lots of electronic payment and less cash, but there are still opportunities to have cash transactions. So you need to understand how that's supposed to work. If you're going to utilize cash boxes, say for your spring carnival or your fall festival, you determine how much change you think you're going to need for your event. The best way to do that is look at previous years, how much they got in petty cash in order to start the event. The proper way to get that cash out of the bank, because you can't use an ATM card and you shouldn't write a check for cash. The check should be written to the person in charge of getting the cash. So say your fall festival chair. So if Mary Smith is your fall festival chair, then 2 authorized signers, the treasurer and president or whoever, would write a check to Mary for the amount that needs to be obtained for the petty cash for the cash boxes. Then she would go cash the check and get the required denominations that are needed for change for your event. Don't keep cash outside the bank account between events. It's easier for bookkeeping if you got out cash, petty cash for your fall festival. At the end of the fall festival, make sure you put that back in, but don't count it as income. It should be a separate deposit, so you can say this is money we took out and money we put right back in. Don't withdraw money directly from the bank account. Like I said, you can't use like an ATM, and don't write checks to cash. A cash counting sheet, which is most units have. If you don't, there is an example on the scpta.org website. Make sure you use that when you're receiving cash in order to count, how many 20s, how many 5s, all of that. And it must be signed by 2 people. It is usually the treasurer and like an event chair, a president, another executive board member that is counting cash, but it does not have to be. Any 2 adult volunteers can serve as counters. Again, receiving money electronically. This happens a lot. I had a question about this just today. So the things that are not allowed for PTAs are the peer-to-peer cash payment apps. This is a Venmo personal account, Cash App. Those are not allowed. For one, it violates their user agreement. And for Venmo, for example, if you are running Venmo payments through somebody's personal account, but it's actually for PTA, if they find out that there is a business use as opposed to a personal use, Venmo is entitled to shut down your account and seize the funds. which would not be great for anybody. It's also just harder to track because then if your neighbor sends you $10 for something, that's all mixed in with the PTA funds. So don't use those. There is now a Venmo charity account that you can set up, and that is fun, but just not a personal account. Credit card processing apps, Square, PayPal, givebacks are absolutely fine for any PTA unit. Make sure that when you set up the transactions for Square or PayPal, we recommend if you're selling memberships and t-shirts and other spiritware, that you always set up like an item in the store for those. So it's just a one click, you know exactly what the money is designated for, and that way you can allocate it in your budget. You don't just have $200 and you're like, oh no, I don't know which part of that was membership versus which part of that was spiritware. So trying not to enter the amounts manually, but having the items so that it's just automatic is the best way to make that happen. Making and recording your deposits. So use a deposit form to document the collection of all of your funds. The form should note to which account, like which budget line item those funds belong to. So $100 was membership, $100 was spiritware. Attach all the documentation to your deposit form. Like when you get an automatic payout from givebacks for memberships, make sure that you go into givebacks and print out that transaction sheet and staple it to your deposit form. That's important just because when you do your financial review, you're going to need a form, a PTA form signed by all the necessary people, and the receipts, the documentation, the Square deposit report for each transaction on your bank statement. Never take cash home. I can't tell you the number of horror stories where people's cars have been broken into, or some other crazy thing you would never expect happened. Cash can be kept in a PTA safe. So if you have a locked safe that there are a very limited number of people who have the code to, you can keep your cash box. Say you have a school store that you run every day. You don't need to go to the bank every day and get petty cash for that. You can keep the petty cash in a secured PTA safe. It cannot be kept in, the office secretary's locked drawer, because that's not limited to PTA volunteers who can access it. But that is fine. If you have a safe in your PTA room, you can use that. A question that comes up a lot is about PTA funds being deposited and other groups being deposited. Only PTA funds can go into the PTA bank account. So if there is a sports team that wants to do a fundraiser or a booster club at your school, they cannot say, hey, can you collect all of these payments for the booster club item and then just write one check from the PTA to the booster club. Unfortunately, we cannot support them in that way. So only PTA funds go into the PTA account. PTA funds can't be deposited into the school's account and then the school write one check to PTA. The funds need to be maintained separately. That's really important for tax purposes and particularly audit purposes, because if the IRS were to perform an audit and see that the funds have been commingled, that would not be good. They would be really fussy about that. All right, I'll pause for a second. If anybody, I see a couple of things in the chat. Let me just check and see if there are questions that I can answer. So yes, how do we provide a receipt and a W-9 to donors? Great question. The W-9 is a form that you can download online. So you can just Google W-9 form and there's a fillable form online. And there's just very basic pieces of information that need to be completed. It's basically the name of your organization. So, Jones High School, PTA, the address, your EIN, which is unique for every PTA unit. That's your employer identification number. It's like your social security number, but for a business. And then the rest of it, you don't have to fill out. And I actually have an example that I filled out one for one of our units. I'll post it on our website. So, and with, example or sample form, so you can see the parts that you do and don't have to fill out, because much of it you don't need to fill out. Like the who it's going to, the business can put that in themselves. The purpose of the W-9 is just to tell a donor or a partner business that we are a legitimate nonprofit organization, and it provides them with all the information like our mailing address and our EIN that they will need in order to record their charitable donation on their taxes. So that's all the W-9 does. We also have donation receipts. There's a sample form on the SCPTA website, so you can pull that and use that or create your own. doesn't matter. As long as it has, what was given, that there was nothing received in exchange for that donation, so that it truly is a charitable donation, and your EIN. You can create your own if you want to make a pretty one or whatever. If you have a charity Venmo account, yes, that is what you may use. You may not use a personal Venmo, but the charity Venmo. And be aware, PayPal owns Venmo. They're like the parent company. So you, when you go to set it up, if it's giving you a hard time, you need a PayPal business account, and then you may set up your Venmo charity account. So just don't get caught up on that. Make sure you set up a PayPal business account, and then they will allow you to set up the Venmo. It's just when PayPal took over Venmo, they made that a requirement. You may adjust the deposit and payment forms as long as you are capturing the necessary information. Again, if you want to make them pretty, if you want to personalize them for your school, that is absolutely fine. We provide samples out there so that you can see what needs to be captured, the information, which budget line item it's associated with, the required signatures, but you may restructure that however you like, much like your budget. We provide examples, but if your community likes a different way to look at the budget, but that's fine. However you want to track it is completely okay. The slide deck is, all of this is being recorded. We will also post just the presentation as a PDF online. So all of that will be there in the next day or two. Sometimes it takes our web guy just a minute or two to get that up. So let me see, I think we've got one more message and then we will carry on. 2 events that have PTA membership signups. All of the items will be for membership costs. Yes. So if you have a Friday PTA membership drive and a Tuesday PTA membership drive, and it's all just membership, absolutely. If you have a safe, stick your cash box in there. Make sure you've got a sheet that tells you, exactly what's in it. So whatever came out can go back in and not count as membership money. It's not income for membership. It's just the money you were using in the meantime. So yes, you can absolutely stick it in the PTA safe for the weekend and pull it back out, because nobody has time to go to the bank twice for something like that. So let's see, discuss how to use budget document rollover funds. Yes, we will talk all about budgeting in just a minute, because that is often something that people want to know. All right, not seeing any other questions. I will go back to our presentation and we'll keep going. All right, expenses. So the treasurer is responsible for managing and supervising all expenditures, payments by check, other payments, and making sure that the dues get paid. Requirements for expenses. Every payment has to match an approved budget line item. So what this means is when you get to the end of the year and your fundraisers were just awesome this year, and you brought in so much more money than you anticipated, and you have like $5,000 of just extra funds, you can't just say, oh, yay, us. We'll just write a check for $5,000 to the school and kind of zero it out that way. Because your members donated those funds, they must have an opportunity to have a say in how they're spent. So you can't just write a check and tell the school to spend it however they would like. That money, if you had great fundraisers, that money can be rolled over to next year and allocated in your budget, approved by the membership, and then distributed. So you absolutely can write a check to your school. It just needs to be for something that is in your approved budget. All disbursements and payments must be approved. There are, in your bylaws and standing rules, it should specify who is authorized to approve. Typically, it's just your authorized signers, whoever you choose to put on your bank account. Most often it's your treasurer, maybe a treasurer-elect if you have one, your president, president-elect. We recommend having 3 people at least on your account, because if you only have 2 and you have to have 2 signers on the check, say if it's me and the president, then if I buy something, I can't get reimbursed because I can't sign my own check. So having 3 people is just, it's a good way, but you can have 4 or 5 or whatever you need. So again, no payments can be made to the school for unbudgeted expenses. That's what I was talking about, just the sort of giving them the excess funds. And never ever pay individuals, invoices, any of that in cash. That's sort of a no-brainer, but we like to just say it just in case. Always use a payment expense form. Again, there's a an example provided. If you have a different format that you like or whatever, it's completely fine. It just needs to include the budget line item that is being paid. So what am I deducting these funds from? Make sure that you record a check number, the date that it's paid, or if it's an ACH, if it's an automatic payment, make sure that you're printing out the documentation that shows that. Reimbursement requests. We have fantastic volunteers, and they're always so willing to go to Walmart and buy all the things we need for the luncheon or the activity. We must have receipts stapled to their reimbursement form that documents their expenses. And they need to be detailed receipts. It can't just be, Walmart 5250. It needs to show what they purchased. Now, that said, we want to be reasonable. Things happen. We're human. Volunteers lose receipts. My dog ate a receipt, not even kidding. So try and be reasonable with that. You don't want to have reimbursement request forms that were paid without original receipts, but we also don't want volunteers to think that they can't help because if, the weird thing happened that they won't get reimbursed. So please use your best judgment, but also don't alienate your volunteers by not reimbursing them for what you know is a very legitimate expense. If someone loses a detailed receipt, having, a copy of their bank statement where it shows that that credit card charge or that payment, that debit card payment cleared their account. If you only have one of those in your review for the year, it's okay, as long as you know that to be legitimate. So again, just use your best judgment on that. 2 people must sign every single check. It's just not optional. The signers can't be related. So my husband and I cannot be 2 of the authorized signers on the account. When it comes to automatic payments or, debit card or credit card payments, you'll see with the debit card form for those of our units that have been authorized to use those, the debit card authorization form needs 2 signers, just like it's a check. So it's really for protection and transparency. That way nobody can come back to you as the treasurer and say, oh, well, that wasn't an expense we were supposed to make. Nobody agreed to that. Well, there are 2 authorized people who said, yes, that expense is legitimate. So it protects you as the treasurer and also just makes sure that everything is on the up and up and nobody can have any questions about whether or not the PTA is spending money appropriately. Again, sort of a no-brainer, but don't ever give out or sign a blank check, even if it is your best friend. And she's like, I don't know how much this is going to be, but I need the check to give the vendor when they drop off the things at school. Can you just sign it, leave it blank? You cannot. You would never want to think that something would happen, but it does. So don't put yourself in that position. Just explain that it's absolutely against the PTA guidelines to give out or sign a blank check. Credit cards. Credit cards are absolutely allowed. There are very few financial institutions that will issue a credit card to an organization like the PTA without having a personal guarantor on it. And I don't know about y'all, but I love the PTA, but I don't want to be the personal guarantor on the PTA's credit card. So yeah, I think maybe Truist is one of the very few banks that allow that. So you are welcome to have a credit card. And, if you have a bank that allows that. We've also instituted just last year the ability to get a debit card because so many times, it's a better deal to buy it on Amazon and maybe you don't have a volunteer that wants to put that large expense on their card and get reimbursed for it. So debit cards with authorization, which just means you need to be a unit in good standing. You need to have met all of your compliance requirements. If your unit is not using a debit card and would like to, you just need to email me and let me know. I'll check your compliance and send you all the forms that you need in order to go to your bank and ask for a debit card. Again, 2 people still have to authorize every transaction, whether it's debit, credit, making a check payment, all of that. And don't share the credit card. Generally, we recommend that with a credit or debit card, there are 1, maybe 2 people that are authorized to use it. And that way you just keep control of it. You don't want to, every time there's an event, you don't want to hand it out to every event chair because it's just hard to keep up with who has it, what they were purchasing, all of those kind of things. So again, debit cards are now allowed. ATM, there's a lot of requirements for the debit card to try and make that as safe as possible, as fraud-proof as possible. One of those things is setting it up at the bank so that ATM withdrawals are not allowed on that debit card and that cash back at the, at the point of sale is not allowed. Electronic payments can be made if you want to set up with your bank, like online banking. For those, if you have a recurring payment, like we have some for the state for our historic house in Columbia, and the water bill has to be paid every month, and the power bill has to be paid every month, and they do those as automatic drafts from our checking account. So with board approval, you can set up those automatic payments. All right, national, state, and district dues. So for those of you who were keeping up with the national convention, there was a $1 increase in national dues. Nobody panic, it does not go into effect until July 1st of next year, so 2025. So you have an entire year to work that into your budget. This was approved, I think, because they had asked for increases that were much larger in years past, and all of the states, the delegates to the National Convention, had voted that down. But this $1 increase, it's the first time, I think, in 14 or 15 years that National PTA has increased their dues. So it is currently $2.25 per member. State dues are $1.25, so $3.50 total. But the national piece will increase to $3.25 next July. So make sure as you are setting your dues amounts that you account for that. Just a reminder that your dues, the amount of your dues are specified in your bylaws. So make sure that you are starting that process to change that amount far enough advance, because the bylaws, you have to like post them for 30 days. So it's not just something you can approve at a meeting and then put into effect. So just make sure you're giving yourself a little running room on that. In your budget, this is something that I didn't even know this until a couple of years ago. Lots of units do this not the right way. And so that's why I want to make a point about local dues. So say I charge $5 for every member for my local unit. $3.50 of that goes to state and national, and $1.50 stays with my school, my local unit. Only that $1.50 per member counts as income for your unit. And the reason that matters is, of course, with filling out the 990. If you are under $50,000 in income, you can fill out the 990N, the postcard, which is like 6 questions and super quick and easy. So those membership dues, making sure that you're only claiming your part of that income, could keep you under that $50,000 limit, which could be pretty helpful. They are listed on your budget, and we'll talk about an example of that, but it's technically called funds held for others. That doesn't really matter, but it's a liability, just so you know. So that's why they're held in a sort of, you record them on your budget because it's something that goes in and out of your bank account, but as income, it's only your $1.50 of the $5. District dues, those vary by district. Each district does it differently, and we have we've done some redistricting recently, and we're kind of putting together boards for those areas, and they will decide at the district level whether they're going to charge just a flat fee, whether it's, I know in Greenville, we do a sliding scale. So depending on your total number of members for the prior year, you could pay between $10 and $100. So anyway, district dues may vary, but the local dues are income, and state is $1.25, and national is $2.25, headed to $3.25 for next year. All right, let me just pause right there. I don't see anything new in the chat, but if anybody wants to unmute or ask a question before we do reconciliations. Nope, okay.
I have a quick question. So you were talking about if we have excess funds in the previous year and how if we don't use it in that year of those excess funds, and we want to use it the next year, we're obviously going to have cost in a budget without income because the funds were from the previous year. So there's going to be a loss on our budget, and it's not going to net to zero. Is that okay?
Which is totally fine. It does not have to net to zero. If, say, you are saving up to buy new playground equipment, you're not going to spend everything you take in because you're trying to stockpile money in order to pay for the playground. So sometimes when there are specific reasons for it, your budget cannot net to zero. I'm a little bit old school, and I love to have mine come out to zero. Like, it just makes me personally happy. So I tend to include a line item in the income section that says, you know, rollover funds from previous year. And although you won't show in your budget updates any new income coming in, because those are dollars you've already received and put into your bank account, for me, it just lets me know that's right. Everything balances out. This is money that I'm just pulling forward from last year. But that way I don't have a negative number, because red and negative numbers make me a little anxious as the treasurer. So I like to make sure that everything can be paid, and that I don't have negatives, but it is up to you. However you like to structure your budget, that is fine.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. All right, reconciliations. This is pretty critical. Like, if you didn't hear almost anything else I say today, reconciliations is a critical bit. Because one, doing this each month makes sure that everything's accounted for, there aren't missing receipts. You would like to know right away if there's something missing or you can't figure out why something is not totaling up right. Doing it at the end of each month means you only have to go back through 30 days and people will remember what that was. If you just throw all of your receipts in a shoebox and don't have your paperwork in order, it's impossible to find any errors that might have happened. And sometimes they're on the bank side. So the way the reconciliation works, that word simply means when you get your bank statement at the end of the month, you sit down with your bank statement and all of your forms that you've processed for the month. So all of your deposit forms that have your deposit receipts stapled to them, all of your payment forms that have the receipts for reimbursement stapled to them. And you look at your bank statement, you go through, and for every line item on the bank statement, every transaction that went in or out of your bank account, you need to check off that you have an associated approved form. So that's all reconciliation means. It means I sat down and went, yep, I see this transaction, I have a form. This transaction, I have a form. That is the sum total of it. So anything that has gone through your bank account needs to have a corresponding piece of paper to go with it. That is all the financial review consists of. They do just that for the entire year. But the treasurer is responsible for doing it every month and preparing an updated budget. So you need to make sure that you are, like, when I get our bank statement, I go through, I update my budget to all of our current totals, and then I send it to the president and I send it to the secretary, and then I present it at the board meetings each month. Just here's an updated snapshot of our budget. This is how much money we have in the bank. This is kind of what we spent this month. This is, oh, we were a little bit over because COVID and costs went up, but it's okay. So making sure that you update that every single month will keep your unit on track and make sure that all the funds are accounted for. Inevitably, during the month, I'm going through the bank statement and I'm like, what is this deposit? Oh, it's givebacks. Because they don't send you a notification. They just send the money to your account. There may have been a deposit that you completely missed. So then you have to go back into givebacks, fill out a form, attach the transaction sheet from givebacks so that you have a piece of paper for everything. If you are using QuickBooks, it's really nice because it will reconcile for you. It's a function of QuickBooks, but a lot of units don't need to use QuickBooks. They're, in and out. We don't use it at the district level, and a lot of units don't use it because you just don't have that much going in and out. So if you're keeping paper records, again, just make a tick mark next to each line on the bank statement to make sure that you have a piece of paper that corresponds to it. And it's, again, just easier to fix those things that might show up on your bank statement, but that you don't have documentation for, to fix them right then. And then just make sure you share the bank statement and the update with at least 2 other people. The budget update goes to your whole board, but they don't need to see the bank statement every month because it's just not that interesting. So the treasurer's report should be presented at every general membership meeting. So, your members are the ones who are really supporting the organization through their donations or soliciting donations from community members. So they deserve to know what's going on and have a say in it. The treasurer's report and what that report looks like is up to you, but it should have your budget and your current numbers, whether you want to include, text blurbs that explain what went in and out, or what, that's completely up to you. But just make sure that you have your current bank balance, a comparison of the budget amount versus your actual income and expense. So we're over on this or we're way under on this. And again, the dues that have been paid to district, state, national, PTA, as opposed to your own membership income. All right, do we have any questions before we move into these sort of specialty things? So we've gone over the things that, like, every month the treasurer should be keeping an eye on.
Kristen, I think there's a few questions in the chat.
Are there? It wasn't telling me. Yes, thank you. Okay. Oops, not what I wanted. All right, I'm gonna start from the bottom. Are virtual or email approvals for purchases, changes, et cetera, okay? Or does everything need to be in a formal setting? No, it does not need to be in a formal setting. That is one of the brilliant COVID keeps that we didn't realize that we could do, but COVID made it necessary. So yes, if you, just like you can send out an e-vote to the board to approve the nominating committee or whatever, if it's something that is happening on the fly, then you absolutely just document it with an electronic vote. Not a problem. You don't need to call a meeting or any of that. We now have a separate debit card account. Do you have any suggestions on how best to include them on the same reconciliation report and budget? Yes, you can incorporate, if you're using a debit card, you incorporate that into your budget update just like if you had written a check, even if it's going through a separate bank account, which is a fantastic idea. We've recommended that if you can get a separate checking account that's only tied to the debit card, that protects all of your other funds. So if somebody stole the treasurer's purse and ran off with it and was using the debit card, there would only be a limited amount of money in that debit card checking account, and the rest of your funds would be protected in your other checking account. Not mandatory, but highly recommended for your protection. But yes, you can tick off both checking account bank statements and include it in one single budget update. So you don't need to run like two budgets, because there will be debit card purchases for Fall Festival and debit card purchases for Teacher Appreciation. And so it can all be combined under one. You don't need to have two separate ones. Please go step by step how two people authorize an expense. Are they both signing a form or receipt? Yes. Great question. On the example reimbursement request form that's on the PTA's website, it has a place for two people to sign the actual reimbursement form that says, yes, you know, Mary Smith has submitted her receipt for the things she bought for our book fair, and we are reimbursing her, you know, $128 for those legitimate expenses for the book fair. And it's signed by the treasurer and the president. So that's how those work. If it is an ACH payment, again, you're using a reimbursement form and just two people need to sign it. So, and those you can adapt.
Okay. Hi, that was my question. So only one person is still signing a check, like not two people sign the check to reimburse?
No, two people
Okay,
sign
that's
the
kinda-
check or the reimbursement form. So if you are writing a check, there need to be two signatures on the actual check that you're going to hand to the person. If it is an electronic payment, there need to be those same two signatures, but on the form authorizing the electronic payment. Does that make sense?
Okay, got it. So you only have to do the form authorizing the expense if it's an electronic payment, not if there's a check involved.
No, you've got to do a form for every expense. If you pay it,
Okay.
it needs to be documented, because on the check, that form is going to capture what line item am I deducting this payment from? Was that a teacher appreciation expense? Was that a spiritware expense? So that's how you're capturing that information for your records. Otherwise, you would just have in the check register that you wrote a check, but it wouldn't document what that should be applied to. So for everything you pay, there should be a completed form. And then if it is a physical check that you are giving someone, there are two signatures on the check. If it is an online payment, an electronic payment, those two signatures go on a form because there is no check.
Okay, thanks.
You sure? I mean, because if it's not clear, I feel like it's like clear as mud. So feel free to be like, nope, that still doesn't make sense.
I think okay.
Sorry, I was just, you don't have to sign the check and the form. It's one or the other, really. I mean, you have to sign the check if you're writing a check, but if you do that, you a form also, right?
The form must be completed.
But it doesn't have to be signed by two people.
Generally it is just,
Okay,
I
regardless.
mean, it is sort of, you know, I mean, when you put it like that, I'm like, well, yeah, it is sort of redundant, but we still always have the form signed by two people, but the same two people are sitting there to sign the check. So hopefully it's not a big deal, but yeah, that is a little bit redundant, but I'm actually okay with redundancy. It's like, I'm also okay with printing everything and killing a tree. As the treasurer, I'm like, I want a hard copy of all my stuff. So, let's see.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Okay, so I know you mentioned teacher appreciation. We're on funds and etc. So I know technically, and I may have this understanding wrong, and you can help me out here. So technically, all the funds that are raised or donated supposed to go to the students. What percentage is supposed to be spent on teachers when it comes to teacher appreciation, etc.? Because I think there's some confusion there where like it's like the teachers want to take control of whatever funds and tell you how to spend it, and you need to give me this, you need to give me that, blah blah blah. Can you help me on that?
These are two hot button topics that we run into all the time. So I'm glad you mentioned it. So it's kind of two separate issues. One is what portion of your PTA budget can be allocated for teacher appreciation or hospitality activities. And I will tell you what the IRS says, and they are sort of the ultimate authority on these things. They are the ones that we abide by no matter what. They say in the regulations that a nominal portion of your budget can be allocated to hospitality. What they do not do is define what nominal is. So that makes it a little challenging. Again, we're asking people to use your best judgment. I mean, y'all are reasonable people. I get to talk to y'all all the time. Y'all are fully reasonable adults. And when you combine multiple reasonable adults with your board, I trust that y'all can make good decisions about what is a reasonable amount. Now, a key part of a successful school, successful students, happy school community is happy teachers. I mean, my mother was a teacher for 30 some odd years. And I mean, after my kids stayed home during COVID, like we could not do enough for them. I get that. We need to take care of our teachers because they are amazing. But we also need to be reasonable in our support for them. We do not have to host a full sit-down dinner for them every month in order to show them some love and appreciation. Getting the biggest bang for your buck is what we always recommend. So as you're looking at your budget, as you're building your budget, as the treasurer, go through and see what percentage, because sometimes I get caught up in the actual numbers, and it's easier if I just run some percentages down the side. So that if we were spending $5,000 on teacher appreciation activities, maybe that didn't feel unreasonable until I realized it was 60% of our total income. Like, oh, that does not feel like anybody would think 60% of the PTA's income is reasonably spent on staff appreciation activities. So again, you are not going to get crosswise with the IRS from some magical number that they defined as you can only spend 5%. 5% is a number that gets tossed around a lot. Apparently, it was a national PTA thing. Best I have been able to figure out by talking to all of our more wise and seasoned members. Forever ago, that was a national PTA recommendation. It is not a rule. There is no hard and fast rule about a specific amount or a specific percentage. The IRS says a nominal amount, which means just a small portion of your budget. Make sure that you are doing things that benefit your entire student body, teachers and families, show your appreciation in creative little ways. Get your members to donate things. If you're trying to have a snack cart once a month to show teachers appreciation, have members do a sign up genius to go to Costco or Sam's and pick up the chips and the drinks, and so that you're not allocating specifically PTA funds. I mean, there are workarounds for all of this. Ask businesses to donate the things that you want to do for your teachers. So there are lots of ways to keep that as a small nominal percent of your budget. Okay, so that's kind of the guidance on what can be hospitality. The second part of that wonderful question is about who controls the PTA's budget. And the simple and always answer to that is the membership controls the PTA's budget. As the treasurer, you are the custodian of the budget. You are the one who has to say the hard things when, there's a board member who's like, has a fabulous idea, but it's not in the budget and she wants to do it tomorrow. And you're like, no, we can't. So you are the custodian of that, but ultimately it is the membership that approves how you spend your money. And that's fair because they helped provide it. So we are a separate entity from the school. We have our own EIN. We are a completely separate organization from the school. That said, we operate in their house. So that's why it's always critical to have good communication with your principal and administrative staff so that they understand what the PTA's priorities are, the things the PTA can and cannot or will and will not fund, and figuring out in those conversations how to align what best benefits the school and what the school needs per the principal and admin staff versus what PTA is excited about, what they would like to impact, and what the PTA membership supports spending the money on. So there is no one other than the membership that can tell the PTA how to spend their funds. That said, we never want to ignore input from our teachers and our administrators because they are at the school all the time. And it should definitely be a collaborative decision. But you should never feel like you are being, forced to or bullied into an expense that you don't think is aligned with the PTA's mission.
Kristen,
Awesome.
can I
Thank
ask a
you so
question?
much.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So with that being said about what you said about our members and everything are the one that how we spend things. How do we go about it if we have pushback from our principal or other staff members? How do we go about it if they tell us they don't agree with what we're trying to do?
That should definitely give you pause, because if you're saying we have a great idea for a new program we'd like to provide for the kids or new equipment that we'd like to provide for the school, and your principal is saying that is not something that we want, that should definitely cause you to stop and reconsider. For one, if your principal and your teachers and admin staff aren't generally on board, it's not going to be successful. There will be parking lot conversation about it, and that is not what we want. We want them, so they should be able to, you should hopefully be able to find some sort of compromise that is still in line with what the PTA is trying to provide and doesn't cross into, clearly doing something the principal has said, we don't agree with that, and that's not what we want.
Okay, and a second part of that, it's kind of reverse. What if we tell the principal, no, we're not comfortable spending that amount on something that she or he or the teachers have asked for, because maybe it doesn't benefit the whole school, it only benefits certain classes. When we try to do something big for the entire school, like guided reading or other things like that, if we can help, but it only helps certain classes and not the whole school as a whole, and we get pushback when we say no, how do we handle that? How do we do it without taking it personal?
Right. So again, this is what the key to any successful PTA, and this is hard for the treasurer because everybody gets wound up about money, right? Is having good communication and a good relationship with your admin staff. We have had this happen many times where the principal is asking the PTA for $20,000 for new equipment just for our special needs classrooms. And as much as we would love to have all the money in the world and be able to fund that, if we did, we would have no funds to allocate to other programs and activities we normally do, or to, teacher mini grants that we always provide. What I have found to be effective is offering partial funding. So if they are asking for something that you in theory support, it's just not what you want to dedicate that big of a chunk of your budget to, because again, it's a limited impact group, then, try and see if you can say, oh, well, we have these other expenses, and we're only anticipating this much income, so we can allocate $1,000 to that effort. And also offer to, contact your district and see if there are other funds. Offer to look around and see if there's grant funding you could help the school apply for to cover that limited impact group. But yeah, so I think often saying we'll try and help as much as we can And then, saying there's just only so much money to go around and we have lots of priorities. But again, that is a relationship issue as opposed to just a treasurer and budget and money numbers issue of trying to make sure that the principal feels like you want to support their desires and needs, and that it's a collaborative relationship. But at the end of the day, what you put in your budget and what the members approve is up to the PTA.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? It looks like something else popped up in the chat. Teacher classroom grants don't necessarily go towards, oh yes, teacher classroom grants are not considered hospitality. I always say hospitality typically involves food. I don't know why, but maybe it's because we're in the South and we just think you should feed people to show them you love them. Hospitality most often involves food. Teacher grants, where they can apply for funding for their classroom for a special new something or a new educational curriculum set that they want to try, that does not count towards your hospitality piece. Great question. All right, let's pop back over and do our special activities, special tasks for the treasurer. And again, these are the ones that people often find, why is it not sharing it? Often find intimidating because they just don't quite understand. Okay, can y'all see that now? Somebody holler if you can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. These are the ones that are intimidating because they don't really understand them. And none of these, I promise you, again, I don't have a background in finance. None of these are difficult once you understand what it is that you are supposed to do. Oh, there. Financial review. Again, do this now. I promise you, you will be so glad. It is a 2-page form. It has a financial review form and the financial review checklist. The form is where you fill in some numbers. The checklist is a whole bunch of yes/no questions that essentially says, did you keep your records in order? Do you have the documentation you're supposed to have? And if you've been doing your monthly reconciliations, that is so easy. Really, the financial review should take 30 minutes to an hour at most. So this makes it easy because it is essentially a review of the monthly reconciliations. This can be completed by any 3 volunteers that are not related to a current check signer. So nobody who was, making decisions and signing the checks on the money can do the review because obviously that just wouldn't serve the purpose. And it can't be my husband, again, can't review my books. But any 3 volunteers, they do not have to be board members. They do not have to be executive board members, any 3 people, or 1 professional CPA. Now, just an aside from kind of my convenience, if you use a CPA and they sign your financial review form, please have them put CPA next to their name so that I don't go back to you and say, I can't approve your financial review you uploaded because you are missing signatures. And then you have to come back to me and say, oh, it's a CPA. So please, if you're using a CPA, just have them note that next to their name. So the reviewers are just verifying that there is a completed deposit or payment form and a receipt for every transaction that went through your bank account, and that the total money you started with minus all the things you paid for plus all the income you received equals what you have now. That is really the crux of it. So financial review, get those done and uploaded now. IRS Form 990 tax filing, same thing. Filing your taxes is the absolute most essential compliance requirement. And the reason for this is that all of the units in South Carolina are granted nonprofit status under the state PTA. So there's an umbrella and everybody falls under our group exemption. And what that means is if any of our subunits are identified by the IRS as not in compliance, it could lose the nonprofit status for everyone, every unit in the state. And I don't know about you, but I do not want to be that treasurer. So make sure that you are filing your taxes. Units that normally have gross receipts, that's your income, of less than 50 grand, can submit the 990N. That's the postcard I was talking about. Super, super easy. 5 or 6 questions, really basic, and you're done. And normally when it says, units that normally have, that's a 5-year average. So if you have that 1 year that the fundraiser went like gangbusters and you had $75,000 in income, if you are at $45,000 for the previous 4 years, that's fine. You still qualify for the postcard. So that's a 5-year average look back on the $50,000 cutoff. If your gross receipts are between 50 and 200,000, it's the Form 990EZ or the 990 long form. If you have more than $200,000 in income, kudos to you, that is impressive, and you're going to fill out the long form. I highly recommend budgeting for a CPA. Not that you can't do it, it's just the IRS has like their own language, and if you're not familiar with it, it can trip you up. So I like to use a CPA and just budget the couple of $100 to have somebody do that. If you are filing certainly the long form, but also the easy, it can be a worthwhile expense to keep everybody from being stressed out. But if you're under $50,000, there is no reason you should be paying a CPA. It is too easy to not do it yourself. And I'm happy to, if you get to it and you can't figure it out, call me for free. I will walk you through it and we will answer those 5 or 6 questions together, and you don't have to pay anybody to do that. Registration and renewal with the Secretary of State. We had training for this on Monday, which I thought was really helpful. So here's sort of the bottom line on the Secretary of State. If you use a professional fundraising company, that's a Boosterthon, that's a Raise Craze, that's somebody who helps you fundraise and keeps a percentage of your profit. So if you are using that kind of company, you must register. Your unit must register with the Secretary of State. If you just do your own in-house fundraising, you are covered by the states, the one I file for the state, our registration. So the only units that have to register, again, are those who use a professional fundraising company. If you have someone who just advises you, they call it a professional fundraising council, which means they just give you ideas for fundraising or tell you how it would probably work well, or give you some, pointers and tips and charge you a flat fee, like $100 for their advice and suggestions about your own fundraising. You do not have to register on your own. That is a council, which is exactly what it means. They're counseling you. They're helping you out. You may have paid them a flat fee. They are not collecting a percentage of your total income from that fundraiser. So each year, the units that are required to register need to do that by November 15th. Again, go ahead and do it now. It's super simple. And then, so you register at the beginning of the year. There's a $50 registration fee for everybody. It's the same for everybody. I think if you do it online, it's like $51.50 or something with the processing fee. So do that registration now. At the end of the year, when you're doing your financial review, you have to send the Secretary of State a financial report, their annual financial report. And there are 2 ways to make that happen. You can either fill out their form, which can be found online and it'll be linked in this presentation, or if you file the 990 EZ or 990 long form, you can just upload that. You don't have to fill out their version of the annual financial report. They will not take the 990 in because it doesn't give any detail. It just says we brought in less than 50 grand. Thank you very much. And it doesn't say how much of that went to like your programs versus how much of that went to like administrative expenses or whatever. So you can either do your 990 EZ, your 990 long form, or the state's annual financial report. If you are not required to register, if you're not using a professional fundraising company, there is a form that you'll need to fill out that just says, hey, this is the name of our unit. We're not required to register. Upload it to GiveBacks to tick that box for compliance. That way, we realized that we didn't know who was using a professional fundraising company. And so we had all of these units who hadn't uploaded their registration because they weren't required to, but we didn't know if they just forgot or they weren't required to. So that's why the form literally is the name of your unit and your name and a tick box that says we're not required to register. Make sure you upload that to GiveBacks just so I don't start calling you going, uh-oh, it doesn't look like you've registered. The South Carolina sales and use tax exemption, this is something that...
Kristen,
Yes, hon.
can you kind of review what companies are considered like fundraising companies? I think there's a few questions of like, does GiveBacks, are they considered a fundraising company if you do it through them? I know for us, we do Boosterthon. We also have the coupon books. But can you kind of like what qualifies them as a quote unquote fundraising company?
Yes. So if they are keeping a percentage of what you take in, they're a fundraising company. if they are holding the funds. Like if their platform is receiving the funds and then they're cutting you one check, they're a fundraising company. On our website, on the scpta.org website, there is a PDF of all of the ones that we could think of that I talked to Kim Wickersham, who's the director of the Charities Division for the Secretary of State, and said, what about this one? What about that one? So most of them that our PTA units use are listed on there as to whether or not they are or are not a fundraising company. Givebacks, it explains also in that document about givebacks, if you are using one of the givebacks fundraising options, you do not need to register, but then there is a different givebacks fundraising option that would mean that you did need to register. And I don't remember off the top of my head what the designation was, but it is explained in that document. Okay.
Does that apply to like skate nights where you get a percentage of the sales from that night?
No, those partnership nights where if you eat at Moe's tonight, Moe's is going to give us 10% of what they take in. Those do not count because Moe's purpose is not a professional fundraising company. They're a restaurant. So if the company does something other than fundraising for organizations, it does not count. So all of those profit sharing kind of things at restaurants or skate nights, those do not require that you register. Okay, so we talked about fundraising. The financial report mentioned on the previous slide, the same as the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State has a financial report and the PTA has the financial review, the 2-page financial review. Those are two separate things. Everybody does the financial review. Only those who have to register because you're using a booster-thon or something have to do the financial report at the end of the year for the Secretary of State. Let's see what else is in our chat. Again, givebacks, there are two options, so you have to figure out which one you're using. All right, Kendra. Oh, thank you, Kendra. We're gonna make you the unofficial secretary. All right, we're gonna come back to those because we're almost done with the slides. And then I will hit all of the questions in the chat in just a moment. So let's talk about the sales and use tax because I think we're at the end. This really is only relevant for our units that are purchasing a lot of things for resale. So if you run a school store and you have snacks and drinks and all of that, and you're making huge purchases at Costco or Sam's Club to sell at your school store, then it may benefit your unit to get the sales and use tax exemption. The exemption does not apply to any items purchased by the PTA for its own use. So if you buy folders for your back to school packets and hand those out, that does not count. It is only things that you are reselling. So there are complete instructions. There's, again, on our website, we got some guidance. We actually asked the sales and use tax folks if they would do a training presentation. They declined to do that. But we've provided all the information and instruction that we can about how to apply for that. It does take 45 to 60 days. So if that's something that you think your unit is going to need, if you start running a school store in the fall, go ahead and get on that and get that exemption applied for now. Nope, there we go. Okay, so again, resources for you to use. scpta.org website. Okay, I'll be the first to admit our website was complete junk up until recently. I mean, just not gonna lie. But please, if you went to it before and you were like, this is essentially useless, I agree. It is not that way anymore. Please go back and visit again. We have worked really hard all of last year to get it updated, to upload every bit of information. Every time we got a question, we were like, hey, we should put this on the website. So the place that I find that I use the most is if you go to the website and you go to Leader Resources across the top, it'll drop down a menu. And the two places that I use all of these videos, all of our trainings are under Leader Training Webinars. And then the how to section is document after document after document of literally what I like are screenshots. Like I need to see it and read it. So it's how do I pay my dues and give backs? And it will walk you through step by step. This is what you should see. This is where you should click. This is how this happens. Everything from how to do all of that to what your meeting minutes should look like if you are voting on your nominating your new board of officers, what your meeting minutes should look like if you're approving a budget. Example budgets are out there. All of these things are out there now. So please do make use of that resource. We've worked really hard to try and make it something that will be helpful to you. Also, the National PTA's website has a lot of information, a lot of good ideas for programming. If you haven't explored the PTA National website, there are like prepared, canned programs for so many things, from book fairs to, I mean, just all sorts of things. So don't reinvent the wheel. Use your time and your volunteers' time most efficiently by taking whatever's already been developed and just tweaking it to make it fit what you need. So lots and lots of ideas out there. The contact information for the entire state board is on the website. Our cell phones are out there because we intend for you to use them. Email, call, text, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you need to do. We are here to support you. That is the purpose of having a state board. And if we don't know the answer, we are plugged in with all of our national leaderships. So the national treasurer, I text her and I'm like, okay, yeah, I have no idea what to say about this. And she's like, okay, I got you. And she'll give me the answer. So that is an efficient, quick way to get things done. And for me, if I don't pick up the phone because I'm in the middle of another meeting or something, I will get back to you generally within a couple of hours. There are rare occasions where it may be the end of the day if I'm traveling or something. But if you don't hear back from me within a day, please reach out again, because that means something weird has happened, because I want to get back to you. This is information you need, and I'm here to help. So don't hesitate to ask. Our job is not to police you. If you're like, oh, we haven't filled out a financial review in 2 years. Okay, it's fine. Stuff happens. Like, I'm never going to give you a hard time about it. We are all volunteers. We all have lives outside of the PTA, hopefully. So, and family comes first. So I'm not going to give you a hard time about it. I'm just going to help you get it all sorted so that you can move forward, be in compliance, not have to worry about it, set your PTA up for success going forward. All right, let's see if we can, I know we're running over time, I'm sorry, but these are kind of important things to cover. Like I said, everybody gets wound up about the finance stuff. Secretary of State registration is not the same as your 501c3, your nonprofit status. Again, the state has filled out all that nonprofit paperwork for you. And as a PTA unit, you get to just jump in under our umbrella and get your nonprofit status for free. The Secretary of State registration is just if you're using a professional fundraising company to help you fundraise. And again, that is in part because they police those fundraising organizations and stay on top of them and make sure that PTAs are not getting sort of taken for a ride by any of those professional fundraisers. So,
Hey, Kristen.
hey.
I assume that the Secretary of State registration is yearly. Is that correct?
It is an annual registration and it is $50 per year.
Okay.
It is not due until November 15th, but go ahead and do it now so you don't have to think about it later. All right. Yes, you can adjust the deposit and payment forms. Absolutely. Does SCPTA prefer checks over debit card transactions? Yes, in that it is more secure. I mean, the fraud does not happen on a hard copy check at nearly the rate it happens on a debit card transaction. I mean, that's just financial truth. But we also are trying to adapt and become, not your grandma's PTA. We recognize that everything is done electronically now. And so I was campaigning for a couple of years before we got the debit cards approved, because I was like, y'all are driving my units crazy because they need to be able to use a debit card. So after much discussion, we push that forward because we want to be responsive. If there are things that are making your life difficult, you need to let me know. If it's a financial thing, PTA is supposed to be fun. PTA is supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, something's wrong and we need to talk about it. Because we either need to work on some relationships within your board or relationships with your admin or streamline the financial process so it's not making you crazy. It's supposed to be fun. We talked about authorizing expenses. So if we have a balloon lady set up balloons for back to school, we need a check signed by 2 people in order to pay her. Yes, if you're going to pay the balloon lady, and write her a check, 2 people need to sign the check and the form. If you are paying her electronically, 2 people need to authorize that payment, that electronic payment, by signing the form. I love the balloon lady for back to school. That's so fun. See, these are great. I get so many great ideas from these. When you have a PTA meeting at the school, is the principal in that meeting? Yes. The principal is part of your PTA board. He should always be included. He should be included, he or she should be included as an officer in givebacks. There is a drop down on that menu for president, treasurer, principal. He gets a vote. He gets to say. So yeah, if you're having a PTA meeting, always, now if he or she doesn't show up, always invite them, include them in the conversation. If they don't have time, there's another conflict, that's fine. You can run your meeting without them, but always do include them.
I have a question.
Yeah, Christina.
About I'm a little confused. So PTA can't use PayPal, but we have to set up.
No, you can use PayPal.
So now we could, because I thought it was just Venmo.
No, PayPal owns Venmo, so you have to set up a PayPal business account to set up your Venmo charity account. And there's a difference between the peer-to-peer Cash App kind of payments versus a payment processing system like Square, where you plug it in your phone and you swipe everybody's card. Those are fine. PayPal now has developed transaction reports. So the deposit that they put into your PTA bank account, you now can get a transaction report that documents what that was, staple it to your deposit form, and you're good to go.
But we're technically using Venmo. That's what we're gearing towards use. Our unit. In general, it's better to use the Venmo than the PayPal. Or they're doing the same thing. Or they're now one. I'm not.
They're now one. Yeah, they're now one. PayPal bought Venmo, just like Google has bought everything. So they are essentially serving the same functions. They are providing the Venmo charity account, and PayPal accounts are providing itemized transactions so that you can print a monthly statement, essentially.
Which means straight into our account, and then that's what we cross over, or that's what we're comparing with our bank statement to this, that we're able to print out to show proof in our notebook that this is what took place.
You got it.
Okay, so so Venmo doesn't technically have are people going towards that because there's not a fee?
Yeah. PayPal's fees for some types of transactions are higher, is what I understand.
Whose are?
PayPal's, I think PayPal's, for some transaction types, their fee, the percent plus 10 cents or whatever it is higher. So you can do the research and decide which one you want to use. It's completely up to you. But any payment processing is fine.
PayPal or Venmo, whichever. Okay, I didn't know that one. I knew Venmo. There was something that came out about us using Venmo, but then I saw, well, technically you have to have a PayPal account to even do a Venmo account.
Yeah.
So just yeah, I guess that gets a little confused, or can get a little confusing.
It is. And a lot of people are choosing the Venmo based on what people who want to donate them are saying. If everybody's coming up to your table like, hey, do y'all take Venmo? You might be more inclined to go with Venmo instead of PayPal. If none of your donors actually have PayPal on their phone or want to use it, then that doesn't really help you.
Well, I guess because if somebody says they want to donate the $5 and they go into the givebacks, but it's still going in Venmo, they're going to have to specifically say what that money is for, correct?
Right.
They'll have to put in there that, say if somebody had donated $500 to a company towards Teacher Appreciation Week, they need to put in there along with their company, this is for Teacher Appreciation Week, or this is just an open donation in general, or this is towards
whatever they're earmarking it for. Yes.
Okay. Okay, got you. And one more question: if a school ever has said that they needed to give you a refund for a check that you wrote, that there was a mistake in a receipt that they had given you, that there was a discount. That was weird. So in other words,
no, I get it. Yeah. Like they thought it was going to be $3,500, but the company gave them a discount. It was only $3,380.
Right. And so in other words, so I basically got sent back those showing from Greenville, I guess Greenville district or whatever is requiring a vendor thing to be filled out for her to be able to do the reimbursement. Sent me a form for them to be able to do the refund, but it was a form. But
why don't we get with that, because I can help you with all the Greenville County stuff. So
okay,
connect with me after this and we will we'll get that form filled out. I don't know what that is, but the district has all kinds of crazy things they have to do for their bookkeeping. So
okay,
we'll get it figured out.
I just thought it was odd with us being PTA, or we wouldn't have had to fill that out.
Right, you would think, but
Yeah.
Again, districts.
Yeah.
Okay, last couple of questions in here. Received our EIN in January, set up our bank account, not really starting. Oh, so no, if you are a brand new PTA unit, you are not expected to fill out the financial review until you have finances to review. So that's a little bit tricky. Just make sure that you're communicating with somebody on the state board about, I mean, generally we all know who our new units are because we're super excited about them. So generally there's a lot of conversation about, we have a new unit, and we know not to expect your compliance information right off the bat. But if you get a reminder, like from Crystal, who is the compliance chair, like, hey, you haven't filled out your stuff, all you have to do is respond and be like, yep, remember, a new unit. And she's like, oh yeah, sorry, got you. And we'll upload something to tick the box again, because I hate red. So I upload pieces of paper that say, this is a new unit, they don't have to do it, and approve it so that it turns green. It's a me thing, y'all, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Kristen, that was me. And so the same for the 990, we can just ignore that, or do we need to just file the EZ?
You can't file until you've got a year's worth of books to file on. So you're good to go until next year.
Okay, when we set up the bank account in June, we just did like a $20 test, just to make sure it went through. So technically, I guess we had like a $20 donation, but it's not really, it was just, okay, just want to make sure we don't.
Yeah, you're good on that.
Appreciate it.
Okay, one more thing before I know folks need to go. We are having the Stanley Cup drawing, and we are not required to register because we're not charging you anything for it. So we don't count as a raffle. I learned that in our training this week. But do put, because some of your names aren't on your, like on the chat. If you'll just go to the chat, put your name and your unit. So whatever school PTA you're in. If you would like to be in the drawing for our Stanley Cup prize, the more trainings you enter, the more trainings you attend, the more entries you get, and you could win a fabulous PTA Stanley Cup. But do make sure that you put that in the chat so that if you just show up as iPhone on my screen, I won't know what to do for you. Okay, let me just keep checking our questions. Oh, there are new ones. I see them. Oh, good. Y'all are just putting, okay. So now I will ask, since everybody is putting name and school in the chat, if there are other questions, please just unmute and ask those. If it's super specific, you can always call me or email me and we can sort that out if it's just about your unit. But if there's something that would be beneficial for everybody to understand, please ask those. That's what we're here for.
Kristen, can you provide the link to the list of fundraising companies or companies that are considered fundraising? I couldn't find it on the website. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. We have been cleaning up and cleaning out on the website. So let me just pull it up and I will drop that in the chat, unless it has been inadvertently removed, in which case I will just apologize and get it uploaded again. Let's see. So in the how-to section, it should be under I don't see it. You're entirely correct. I see the exemption form and the gift card guidance, but right above that used to be the official be-all end-all from the Secretary of State. Okay, I will get it reposted. Apologies, friends. I did not know that it had gotten stripped off.
And one other quick question. So if we're thinking about using Boosterthon, but we have not solidified everything, should we still go ahead and fill out that form?
Once you make the decision, once you sign the Boosterthon contract and you're sure you're moving forward, you can register at that point. There is not, you can register with them anytime you decide. So if you got to, January and we're like, oh, we're going to do a booster-a-thon or some other professional fundraising company, you could register at that point. But I would wait until you're sure, because you don't want to register and then have to give them an annual report when you didn't end up using booster-a-thon. Does that make sense? It would just be a hassle for you that you don't need. No, I would wait
Okay.
until you're sure. All right. Well, like I said, thank you all. I know everybody is in summer mode still, and it's hard to take the middle of your day and get in PTA mode, but I appreciate you being here. And really, I'm happy to answer any question. Don't hesitate to get in touch, and I'll get back to you. And I appreciate all of you. Nobody wants to be treasurer. I can't figure out why, because I think it's one of the easier positions once you just kind of understand that it's just about being organized. So I appreciate all of you who have stepped up and signed up to do that. And I'm here to make that as easy and stress-free as possible this year. So just reach out and let me know. All right, I will leave it up so everybody can finish putting their name in, but otherwise y'all are free to go. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kristen. You're
Thanks,
great.